All right, good day. We've got CEO Greg Beischer of Alaska Energy Metals joining us today. Alaska Energy Metals is delineating and developing a large polymetallic exploration target containing nickel, copper, cobalt, chrome, iron, platinum, palladium, and gold in central Alaska near existing transportation and power infrastructure. Greg is a highly experienced and successful mining exploration entrepreneur, and he's here to tell us about the Nikolai project. I'm Martin Gago with Market Radius Research. It's Wednesday, November the 1st. Please remember, this is neither recommendation nor investment advice. We're here to learn about the company. Greg, thank you very much for joining us. And please tell us about what you're doing there in Alaska.
Thanks very much, Martin, and thanks for saying that I'm experienced. And now that I think about it, I am experienced because I actually landed on this exact spot in Alaska where our drill is now 27 years ago. My first career was as a geologist with Inco, the biggest nickel mining company in the world at the time. And they had sent me up to Alaska, of course, to look for nickel. The targeting team had identified that this area had geologic similarities to the Norilsk area of Russia, which is the biggest accumulation of nickel, massive sulfide nickel on Earth. And so they said, Greg, go up there and find another Norilsk. And off I went. I moved to Alaska in 1995. And I literally landed right at this spot, my first couple days on the job. And we actually found nickel. My geologists actually found nickel sticking right out of the ground here. And we did 5 great years of exploration there. Didn't find the massive sulfides that Inco wanted me to find, but we drilled hundreds of meters of disseminated nickel sulfide, and it wasn't a high enough concentration at the time. But times are different for nickel now. There's a whole new future for nickel. So I was able to reacquire all the mineral rights a couple of years ago to the project and all the historical information. And so we formed Alaska Energy Metals just in April of this year. And we're off to the races. We've done a great drilling program over the summer, and I think we've really tied into something fantastic here. So I have to warn you that I will make forward-looking statements, and I don't like to just skip over this slide. My group has been together for a long time. We all live in Alaska, and sometimes in the exploration business, things don't always work out the way you predict. But we've built a reputation for doing things right and for doing our very best with our shareholders' money. So, what's new for nickel? Well, it's primary use has always been the manufacture of stainless steel, a little bit of nickel and chrome, and the steel doesn't rust, which is great. And there's a great number of other uses for nickel as well. But now, all of a sudden, there's a brand new use, and it's no small use. There's 29 kilos of nickel in every single electric vehicle passenger car batteries. So, they call them lithium ion batteries, but the reality is there's more graphite and nickel in the battery by weight, certainly. And so a whole new use that's going to make nickel demand really soar. At least that's the prediction. And I've been pretty surprised personally at how fast people are adopting electric vehicles. So I think the adoption rate is increasing and will increase pretty much exponentially from here, I think. So does the Department of Energy, but they see the risk too, that if they want a nice smooth transition to electric vehicles, and not just the vehicles, but also the storage capacity, large storage batteries. If we're going to use windmills and solar panels, we've got to store that energy. And that means that there's a lot of metals involved, but the DOE sees supply risk, particularly for lithium and nickel going forward into the future. And exceptional demand is predicted by S&P for nickel. And the current U.S. Administration is putting up a lot of money. There are strings attached to it. The metals are meant to be sourced from free trade countries, but we have to. To me, it's much better to get it locally, domestically, even. There's actually only one nickel mine in the United States that Lundin Mining operates on the UP of Michigan, but none of that nickel actually stays in the United States. The price of nickel is down a bit right now, and the main reason is I think that there's a lot of laterite nickel production in Indonesia. The developments there are surging to meet demand, and they're meeting it quite well. But the unfortunate part of that is that the carbon footprint of laterite nickel is pretty high, especially when you upgrade it to battery grade nickel. So if the whole idea is to put electric vehicles on the road and use nickel to make the batteries, then laterite is not necessarily the good way to do it. And again, we'd be better off to produce it locally. Of course, good neighbor Canada supplies about half of the United States needs for nickel. But, now I'm seeing that Ontario and Quebec are building battery plants, huge battery plants. And I'm not so sure all of that nickel is going to make it south of the border. So I think it's especially important for the United States to have its own domestic supply. And, I think we've got a great prospect here in Alaska. I can't call it a deposit yet. We're still waiting on some assay numbers before we can calculate the first actual resource, but we're getting close. So I might be able to tell you, though, about a possible mineral deposit. And every black dot on this map is a historical hole, some of which I drilled myself way back in the 90s. And this band of yellow is a zone of mineralization, a zone of disseminated sulfide mineralization. So we raised money this year and set out to drill holes. We drilled the ones shown in blue. And we know drill those holes and that the historical grade of 0.35% nickel equivalent, that's around 0.25% nickel, plus the value of copper, cobalt, platinum, and palladium. If that historic grade holds up in these holes, then and we drill the same amount next year, the yellow holes, so calculate that volume of rock outlined in red, as long as that 0.35 holds up, we're going to have somewhere between 2.1 and 2.8 billion pounds of nickel in the ground in an inferred resource. That's just after two seasons of drilling. And that's a pretty darn sizable nickel deposit that'll move us up in the same size categories some of our peers like Canada Nickel or FPX, who measured their net or their market capitalization in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think we should be equally valued sometime pretty soon. Good team. We know what we're doing. Been together previously as Millrock Resources, a project generator company focused on Alaska. And we've executed programs all over the state. And I would say also now we're very well connected in the capital markets side of things. Tyron Breitenbach out of Toronto, an advisor, Commodity Partners, a group out of Vancouver that's helped us raise $12 million over the course of the summer to execute the drilling and marketing work that we're presently doing. So the company's in quite good shape, just 51 million shares outstanding. We're trading up over 60 cents now, so market cap's probably 30 or 31 million. We raised money through the summer, started the company just in April, did a recapitalization, raising 2.7 million, no warrant, and that stock was immediately free trading. I don't think anybody sold it. And then we raised a total of 9.5 million over the summer in both a brokered and non-brokered placement at 40 cents with a warrant that's at 80 cents, half warrant. And so each full warrant is exercisable at 80 cents. So most of my new investors are the biggest shareholders of the company. The brokered placement was done by Emerging Equities of Calgary with Cormark and Echelon, Red Cloud, and Canaccord as syndicate participants. And so a lot of these people, I think, were initial investors in Canada Nickel, which is a good parallel, I think, to Alaska Energy Metals, and they've done quite well. Right. So we're in a pretty good spot for Alaska. I live here in Anchorage, have ever since '95. Project's probably a 5 or 6 hour drive from my home on paved highways, or you could fly to Fairbanks, and it's just a couple of hours down the highway from there. Power is not too far away, maybe 70 kilometers. There's a railway that runs between Fairbanks and Anchorage and Deepwater Port. So when we go to build a mine, we're not too bad a shape considering how far north we are. So I'm zooming in. Here's the Richardson Highway coming south from Fairbanks, passing through the Alaska Range Mountains. You can see the snow and some glaciers there in the high country. We've got 2 blocks of claims. Canwell, which is just in the mountains here, right beside the highway, and then the Eureka Zone, where we've got this large disseminated mineralized zone. So we can get pretty close to it. There's an old gravel road here that was built years ago to service alluvial mines here in the mountains. It would take a fair bit of work to upgrade that, and we'd need a bridge across the river here. But potentially when in the years in the future, we'll be able to upgrade that and extend it right out onto the prospect. Right now, we're using helicopter to move and service our drill. So it'd be nice to get away from that, but the capital cost to build the road would also be pretty substantial too. So we're just sizing that up now at the moment.
Greg, that road looks like it's maybe 15, 20 kilometers, and then you'd need a few more, maybe 5, 10 kilometers in addition.
It's only about 3.5, 4 kilometers across here, and this is pretty calm country too. It's pretty flat-lying tundra on the range front here.
And looking from the satellite image, it looks like you're obviously not on a mountain. You're in a valley, a low area there. So it looks like obviously with the road quite accessible and nothing really getting in the way.
Yeah, no, the terrain's pretty good. A Canwell block, it's steep country, but there's roads actually that go all over the claim block, 4-wheeler roads, pickup roads. But yeah, so it's not too bad. We'd be able to get out there pretty easily. This is also a good time to talk about permitting because people often ask about that. And I think the good thing that we've got going is that all the water draining off these mountains and through the project is really heavily laden with silt. It's glacial meltwater. And so as a consequence, it really doesn't support any fish life. And this becomes the Delta River here. One of those great big wide multi-channel braided rivers, glacial river that's just full of silt and doesn't support any fish life. So there's probably not a salmon for at least 80 kilometers downstream. And salmon's always a hot button topic in Alaska, but there's no salmon spawning anywhere on the project or anywhere downstream for a very long way. Having said that, there's some sensitivities. This area here is called Tanga Lakes. It's a prized area for canoers and rafters. They like to float down the upper Delta River here. It's nice and clear. but until it hits the drainage from our claims, then it gets all silty, and that's where people pull out. So there'll be some opposition, I'm sure, from people, but overall, I think we're in a very formidable place. It's on state of Alaska owned land, and the state's quite pro resource, and we're in the Otna Native Corporation region. As you know, land claims have long been resolved in Alaska, but there's no actual native land immediately in this area. So again, I think we're in a very formidable spot to build a mine. We've got all our exploration permits in hand, of course, for years to come. Yeah. So I just want to show you a cross section through the deposit. So here's the surface of the earth here. The deposit comes right to surface. It's just hidden by a little bit of glacial cover. And as I mentioned, it was discovered by my Inco team back in the 1990s, where there was a couple of surface outcrops with disseminated nickel mineralization and a fantastic soil anomaly above this. And so we drilled a couple of holes, not right on this cross section, but back in the 90s. And honestly, it was a disappointment. We thought we were going to find rich, massive sulfide, but we just got all this hundreds of meters of disseminated nickel sulfide mineralization. And at the time, like I say, it was a disappointment, too low grade back then, but now it absolutely could be ore grade. And it's thick. I mean, look at this, 300 meters across. We announced this hole a few weeks ago. And then, so 341 meters down hole. But that's somewhere in the order of 310 meters true thickness of this entire mineralized zone. The central portion, colored in the darker red colors, a bit higher grade, but then the outsides, which are more around 0.32%. But overall, across the whole thing, it's very typically, when you take the mineralized zone as a whole, it's around 0.34%, 0.35% nickel equivalent. That's around 0.25% nickel, plus the value of copper, cobalt, platinum, and palladium. And this is what it looks like. It's a peridotite, an ultramafic rock, with disseminations of nickel, copper, and iron sulfide. So these little shiny specks are what we're looking for here. So with a deposit like this, the metallurgy and recovery rate of those grains of sulfide is going to be crucially important. And we're starting that work in earnest now that we've got fresh drill core to work with. But we have done some work on historical drill cores, and we do have information from that historic work. And what we see is that at least in the core zone, where the grade's slightly higher, that over 90% of the nickel is in the form of the common sulfide mineral pentlandite, which is great news because it's readily recoverable by standard flotation methods. It seems like the outer portions of the deposit have less pentlandite, but more of a nickel iron alloy, kind of like the aurite that's in FPX's deposit, for example, in British Columbia. So good news there too, because that can be recovered as well. And not too much of the nickel is tied up in the silicate minerals like olivine. But there's still a ton of work to do, and it will have quite a bearing on the economics for a mine development. And we'll have to be looking at both in the coming year for sure. One good thing
has much metallurgy work been done so far on it, or this is just the type of mineralization that historically and what is what's relatively easy to extract?
That's right. At least we know that the nickel is in a potentially recoverable form, but none of that bench scale flotation or flow sheet processing has been done yet. We're starting it right now, and we'll have that ready in a few months as well.
All right.
Yeah. But one good thing we have noticed on a microscopic basis is that it's fairly coarse grained, and the grains of sulfide are fairly distinct from one another. Here's some iron sulfide here, but there's the pentlandite, the nickel sulfide. So separate and distinct. And that means we shouldn't have to grind it too far to liberate those grains of nickel and keep the sulfides separate. So good initial signs, but lots to do. So our approach has been pretty simple. Let's go out and drill these holes shown in blue. If that historical 0.35% nickel equivalent holds up, after just one drill program, we're going to have somewhere between 1.3 and 1.7 billion pounds of nickel, plus a fair bit of other metal to go along with it. Remember now, this doesn't account for nickel that is tied up in silicate minerals. It doesn't think about whether we can recover all these metals, and we know that we can't. So, but it just gives an overall order of magnitude indication of the resource that we should be able to come out with a few months from now. But I've got a couple reds here, and the reason for that is that it was just recently that we were able to purchase the historical data set. It was in great shape. It's over $30 million worth of exploration work, all kinds of great information, but particularly the logs and assays and photographs of all these historical holes. And you'll notice there's a couple of clusters that are close together, and they're close enough that we should be able to calculate a resource on those two areas right away. And so you can look forward to that coming up here pretty soon. And it'll be a sizable amount of nickel. And there's, 3 kilometers between them. These holes, just like every hole that's gone into this zone, got very similar results. And so it's going to become pretty obvious, I think, that these two places will join up, and then we'll add. So we'll announce this resource and this resource soon, and then by March we'll add in our blue drilling here. So we'll have really quite a sizable deposit by March of 2024.
The data you purchased, you said there are assays in there as well. Are there core samples, and are you able to use that data itself for the resource estimate, or is it more data just to guide your own drilling and your own understanding of it?
No, we can definitely use it. We know where the core is. We observe the core. We're actually having a party, Stantec, sign off or calculate the resource for us. And they had advised us that 300 meters is adequate spacing to calculate an inferred resource. And they've looked at all the QA/QC information for the historical drilling, and they tell us that they're happy with it and are going to be willing to sign off on a resource. So there'll be a resource here soon. There'll be a resource right there soon. And then a few months from now, we'll add the bigger red zone there in March. So it'll be quite a lot of nickel, and I think each announcement should seriously increase the price of our shares.
Is we can't call it an ore body yet, the structure, is it open? Like, it looked like it still it hadn't been drilled to depth on it. Is it east, west, south, north? Is it well delineated, or is there still opportunities there?
Lots of opportunity. I mean, this hole and this hole, I mean, there's a kilometer or more between them, but they got the very similar result. And there's no misses anywhere in between. Anytime anyone's ever drilled into this band of rock that I'm showing in yellow, around 0.35% nickel. What I'm showing here is maybe 7 or 8 kilometers long, but we think it goes for at least 12 kilometers like this, but based on historical drilling and surface rock samples. So it really could be quite extensive.
You did yourself, or were part of the team that did some of the initial drilling. How old is all this drilling, or were there other owners and prospectors in between today you and the young you?
Yeah, yeah, there's a bit of a history. And just to further answer your question, the strike extent of the zone seems quite long, but and this hole here, historical hole, drilled by Pure Nickel back in 2007, that went pretty deep. That's got to be 600 meters below surface down to this point, measured vertically. So pretty substantial depth extent, and it seems to keep going. That's probably the deepest hole that's been drilled. So, but it is open in all three directions then. But yeah, the history was Inco with me at the helm for 5 years in the late 90s. Sold the project then to a TSX venture company called Pure Nickel, who did, I would say, 8 years of great work there in joint venture, also first with Anglo American and then with Itochu. And they were sharp geologists, did really good work, found what I found, lots and lots of disseminated sulfides. They, of course, were looking for those massive sulfides as well. But eventually in 2012, the nickel price was down and Pure Nickel couldn't keep going. And eventually they dropped the claims, and I kept my eye on them. And then finally I just, a few years ago, staked them up. Yeah.
Right.
So this is what we did this year: drilled those blue holes, bought the data, and we're crunching all those numbers. And that information will come out in two batches in the next 5 months. And then we look to next year. And I'm actually just in the middle of adjusting this slide because I think we're going to get pretty aggressive and more or less drill it from around here all the way over to here at the inferred spacing every 300 meters. It's so homogeneous, so regular that we can do it at 300 meters and be able to calculate the resource. But even if we just do the holes shown in yellow, along with the ones we've already done in blue, then we're going to have at least 2.1 to 2.8 billion pounds of nickel in the ground. But I think if we drill it from all the way over here, all the way to there, it's going to be substantially more than that. So we're just sort of working up a new slide and proposal right now.
About how many meters of drilling in the ballpark, do you expect to be doing? I guess.
Yeah, so to drill it from here all the way over to here at 300 meter spacings would take us about 15,000 meters.
Like you've got quite a few blue lines there, which is your work, correct? How many drill holes has been punched into this project over the decades?
I don't have that exact number at my fingertips, but it's less than you would think, considering.
Just because of the consistency, they didn't have to. They're not looking for narrow veins or anything like that.
Well, yeah, and again, we Inco and Pure Nickel were hunting for the massive high grade, and so it was a hole here and hole there. Nobody's ever tried to actually drill off a resource here before. Pure Nickel was starting to think about it in 2012, but the price just wasn't there, and their partner Itochu wasn't supportive, so it didn't happen. Yeah. So you can imagine if we drill it from here to here, 5 kilometer strike length, it's going to put us up in the ballpark of Canada Nickel. They recently came out with a feasibility study on their Crawford deposit and a new resource estimate. So they've got over 15 billion pounds of nickel at their deposit near Timmins, and this is just project into the future. We don't have this yet. But if we do an aggressive 15,000 meter program next year, we're definitely going to be up in the same sort of ballpark in terms of contained metal. And they're at 163 million. We're at 30, so we should move up there pretty quickly, along with some of these other companies. And only 3 of these are actually in the United States: Stillwater, Polymet, and now our Eureka Zone, or the Nikolai project. For me, I was really pleased to see Anglo American come into Canada Nickel. Great endorsement of the company and the people that run it, but also for me, it would just solidified my thinking that yes, our mining industry is going to be mining deposits that are only 0.25% nickel. I mean, things like Sudbury or Norilsk, I mean, the grade is spectacular, 1.5, 2%, even more. But massive sulfide nickel deposits are just so rare, so hard to find. So I think Anglo and Glencore and others have seen that our mining industry is just going to have to come after this new generation of nickel deposits, the ones that are in this grade range. And so it's great to see that they believe this, and it helped me come to believe it too, quite honestly. But grade is always king, and we certainly haven't given up on the notion that we could find massive sulfides. And there are places where there is actual rich, massive sulfide exposed right at surface, very high grade, extremely high grades in nickel and copper, but not just that, enriched in not even just platinum, palladium, but all the really rare platinoid elements as well. So we'd love to find a great big deposit like this. But even a few pods of material like this could really help sweeten up the economics of the larger bulk tonnage deposit. So we've done a lot of work on the Canwell block this summer. We didn't do any drilling. We weren't ready. We needed to do all the geophysics, comprehensive data compilation, but we've got that done. Watch for some announcements soon on that information. But we'll be prepared to put a 4th drill rig out here for several thousand meters next year as well.
The Canwell, that's just from remembering from your map, that's a little bit north, and I guess a little kind of northeast of Nikolai project, right?
I'll jump back for you. Yep. Yeah, so the big Eureka zone that I've been spending my time talking about is down here on this block of claims, but the Canwell block is up here. And as you saw in the picture, it gets pretty mountainous, but there's trails that lead right off the paved highway right up into the claim block. We'll probably still have to use a helicopter to get at the initial drill sites, but the accessibility is pretty darn good. Yeah. Here's the paved highway right here, and then you can drive right up to these prospects right here, and then up right here to here, in fact. Okay. So we'll look forward to that. It'd be great to find massive sulfides to go along with this great bulk tonnage Eureka zone. And we really are just getting started. People have got an opportunity to buy in at a pretty low price right now. Lots of catalysts over the next few months. And we're really starting to get out there and market it, tell the story, and let investors know about it. Hence being here visiting with you today. But it is a bit seasonal. We start work typically in May. It's getting snowy by October, and in the early stages of exploration, it's best just to stick to the summer months. It's more cost effective, but once we get road access, we can certainly go year round if we have to. Yeah, so that's the summary, Martin, and glad to take questions.
Excellent. All right. Well, thanks, Greg. Has there been any notable M&A or staking in the same region as you?
Right. So we've got neighbors now. This block of claims shown in purple is actually a company called Cobalt, which you may have heard of, KOB. they're a little bit famous because it was a group of geologists financed initially by Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos with the idea that the geologists would use artificial intelligence or machine learning to actually analyze the entire world for the most prospective places to look for nickel and cobalt, because those guys know that those metals are going to be key to a transition to greater electrical energy. And so, they ended up looking all over the world and selecting claims here. So they're working away on their claims at the moment, and we're good neighbors. And then an Australian company came along and sort of surrounded us here with this green block of claims. But maybe we could have staked a bit more a few years ago. Money was tight, but I know I've got for sure the best ground here. We've covered all the best prospects, and I'm happy with our land package, but it's good to see that others have recognized the potential in the area.
Greg, it was previously owned and then you staked it. So given the staking, it's not burdened with NSRs or royalties or anything like that, is it?
The original project included a huge tract like this, but it all fell open except for the Canwell block. An astute prospector had kept that block there. So we were able to acquire the mineral rights to the Eureka zone for, just a few tens of thousands of dollars, really, by claim staking. But we made and so there's no royalty there. And we have an option to purchase 100% of the Canwell block, but there is a royalty of 3%, but it's fully buyable for $9 million. So, if there's a great big ore body here, $9 million won't seem like too much to buy out the royalty completely.
Another question here from the audience. What is the long-term vision for AEMC? You mentioned a mining operation. Is the company committed to developing or operating the mine independently, or is there a possibility of seeking a buyout from a larger player or consortium in the future?
Ultimately, I suspect that we would sell the deposit to a major mining company. It would be a very big, large open pit operation, and probably only really suitable for some of the bigger mining companies in the world. It's been interesting to see Anglo as a strategic partner for Canada Nickel, and I think it's great that Jogmec and Outokumpu and now even others have come in on FPX's project. And, it's always great to get that stamp of approval from a strategic investor like that. And we would entertain that right now. But I'd be more inclined to do a strategic investment with, say, a battery company or a car company that wants to secure long-term nickel supply. Yeah, we're going to play that by ear, Martin. It would be, I think our preference would be get bought out at some great multiple to our current 60-cent share price. But we'll just go through everything we've got to do, drill off the resource, determine the metallurgy, calculate the PEA and the feasibility study, and if someone decides that they like it, they'll come along and buy us out. But if not, we'll just keep going.
In light of the recent assay results from drill hole 001 and 002, were there any findings that were unexpected or diverged from the anticipated outcomes? Additionally, could you share any insights on how these results might influence your strategic direction going forward?
Right. No, a great question. But, there was no surprises, good or bad. There's still assays pending, so I don't know for sure. But visually, we hit exactly what we expected to hit with all 8 of the holes that we drilled. And so far, the 4 holes we've announced all came back with 0.34 to 0.35% nickel equivalent. It's astoundingly homogeneous, really. Yeah. But big mining companies love that too. If they know that there's a multi-decade deposit that high on the grade being quite irregular like that, I think that'd be very appealing, because big mining companies know that if they've got decades, they're likely to hit 2 or 3 price spikes in a metal. That is when a mine really pays off. So it's the sort of deposit that big companies are looking for. But on the other hand, so that's great, but there was no happy surprises either. We didn't drill into massive sulfides. Like, we did have our fingers crossed in the background that would happen, but we're happy with it's very predictable and regular.
Greg, that's been excellent. I think very thorough. I can't think of any major topics that we haven't addressed here. So you've got some catalysts coming up. Could you just wrap this up with any final comments, and as well just highlight what key catalyst or news events investors should expect over the coming 3, 6, or 9 months, the major things to look out for?
Sure thing. So you've got drill results coming out a couple of weeks from now, and then the final results probably in early December. We probably will announce a resource calculation based on the historical holes in 2 spots before the end of the year as well. And then into March of next year is when we'll put out the major resource calculation. So no shortage of news flow over the next 5 to 6 months. And then we're on to, before we know it, drilling again next year.
Excellent. Greg, thank you very much. I really appreciate the time going over this this fascinating story with huge potential there. So thank you. Love to have you back as more news rolls out, and have a great day.
Great. I'll be glad to give you the update once we get everything together.